Eleanor Hartwell paid 40 cents for a train car that had been rotting on abandoned tracks for decades. Inside, she found something that powerful men had buried for over half a century. The railyard foreman didn't even look up when Eleanor asked about the price. 40 cents, Samuel Briggs muttered, scratching numbers into a ledger with fingers stained black from coal dust and tobacco. Scrap value. Take it today or it goes to the smelter tomorrow morning. 40 cents for an entire boxcar. Eleanor stood there in the bitter autumn chill of 1965, her worn coat pulled tight against the wind, watching her breath cloud in the Pennsylvania air. She wondered what kind of desperation, or what kind of secret, made a man sell rolling stock for less than a pound of coffee. The Pittsburgh and Lake Erie Railway had abandoned this siding in Millbrook 17 years ago, leaving a graveyard of rusted metal slowly sinking into the muddy earth beside the Allegheny River. Most of the cars had been hauled away for scrap during the war effort, melted down to build tanks and battleships. This one had been left behind, forgotten. Eleanor studied the boxcar with the practiced eye of a woman who'd learned to see value where others saw junk. Rust had consumed the iron panels in places, leaving jagged holes like open wounds that wept orange stains down the sides. The wooden sliding door hung at an angle, one of its rails broken and dangling. Faded paint still showed beneath the decay PNLE 4729. Built 1912, according to the barely legible manufacturer's stamp near the coupling. The entire structure leaned slightly to one side, as if exhausted from standing upright for so many years. Most people would see nothing but worthless scrap metal destined for the furnace. But Eleanor saw possibility. She saw enough iron and steel to repair the conveyor system at her textile mill. Maybe enough to reinforce the loading dock that had started to sag last spring. The mill had been her father's before his death 2 years ago, and now it was hers, along with every debt, every broken machine, every impossible choice required to keep 23 women employed in a town where work had become scarce as hope. 40 cents invested could save her $300 in repairs if she worked it right, if she cut and hauled the metal herself on weekends. Simple mathematics for a woman who'd been counting every penny since the bank had threatened foreclosure. "I'll take it," Eleanor said, reaching into her handbag and pulling out 2 quarters that she'd been saving for groceries. Briggs finally looked up from his ledger. Something flickered across his weathered, deeply lined face. Was it relief? Fear? His eyes met hers for just a fraction of a second before sliding away to focus on the coins. He took them quickly, almost snatching them from her palm, and shoved a hastily prepared bill of sale across the scarred wooden desk. His hand trembled slightly as he pointed to the signature line. "Sign here, Mrs. Hartwell." And, he paused, clearing his throat roughly. "Don't go poking around inside too much. Thing's probably crawling with rats and rot. Might be hornets' nests up in the corners. Just cut it up and haul it out quick as you can. Don't waste time exploring it." The warning settled wrong in Eleanor's stomach, the way Briggs's eyes had refused to hold hers when he spoke. Men didn't warn you about rats with that tone in their voice. They didn't tremble when they mentioned hornets. They warned you about things that actually mattered, things that carried real danger. Eleanor signed the paper, folded her copy carefully into her handbag, and walked out into the cold afternoon without another word. But as she drove her battered pickup truck home through the gathering dusk, she couldn't shake the image of Samuel Briggs's trembling hands, or the way he'd looked at those 2 quarters as if they were burning his fingers. That night, Eleanor barely slept. She lay in her small bedroom above the mill office, listening to the familiar sounds of the building settling, the creak of old timber and the whistle of wind through gaps in the walls. She thought about her father, about how he'd taught her to see past surfaces, to find value in things others discarded. Eleanor, he'd said a month before the heart attack took him, the world's full of secrets hiding in plain sight. Most folks are too busy or too scared to look. She wondered what secrets might be hiding in a train car abandoned for nearly 2 decades. The next morning, Eleanor arrived at the railyard just after dawn with her German shepherd, Duchess, sitting alert in the passenger seat. Frost covered everything in a thin white layer that crunched under her boots as she walked toward the boxcar. The air was sharp and cold enough to hurt her lungs. Duchess had been her constant companion for 4 years, a gift from her father on her 30th birthday. The dog had never shown fear of anything, not thunderstorms, not strange men, not even the time a black bear had wandered through town and sent everyone else running for cover. But when they got within 30 feet of the boxcar, Duchess stopped as if she'd hit an invisible wall. Every muscle in the dog's body went rigid. Her ears flattened tight against her skull, and a low, uneasy whine started deep in her throat, the sound she made before lightning struck, when something wrong approached that human senses couldn't detect yet. "What is it, girl?" Eleanor murmured, crouching down to run her hand along the dog's neck. She could feel the tension there, muscles drawn tight as piano wire beneath the thick fur. "It's just an old train car." But even as she spoke the words, Eleanor felt it too. The air around the boxcar felt different. Heavier, somehow, pressing down with invisible weight. And there was a smell, not just the expected rust and decay, but something else underneath it. Something chemical and stale, like the air inside a sealed room that hadn't been opened in decades, where old secrets had been locked away to rot in darkness. Eleanor approached the sliding door slowly. The metal handle was crusted thick with rust that flaked off in orange powder when she touched it. She pulled hard, using her full weight, and the door gave way with a metallic shriek that echoed across the empty railyard like a scream. The door jerked open about 20 inches before sticking fast on its broken rail. Just wide enough for a person to squeeze through sideways. She brought a kerosene lantern from the mill, and now she lit it with matches from her pocket. The flame caught and steadied, casting warm yellow light that pushed against the absolute darkness inside the boxcar. Eleanor held the lantern up to the narrow opening and peered inside. What she saw made no sense. Boxcars were supposed to be empty shells, hollow metal, and wood containers for transporting cargo. This one had been modified. She could see where someone had constructed a false wall about 5 feet from the true back end of the car, creating a hidden compartment that wouldn't be visible from the outside or from a casual glance through the door. The wood used for the partition looked newer than the rest of the car, maybe 40 or 50 years old instead of the full 53 years since the car had been built. Someone had gone to considerable trouble and expense to build a secret space inside this train car. The question was, why? Duchess barked once, sharp and urgent, then turned and trotted a good 40 feet away before sitting down firmly in the frost-covered grass. The dog's dark eyes watched Eleanor intently, but she refused to come any closer to the boxcar, refused to enter the circle of whatever wrongness radiated from it. Eleanor looked back at the opening, at the darkness beyond, and felt her heart hammering against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to listen to the dog, to walk away, to leave this mystery alone. But curiosity warred with caution, and Eleanor had never been particularly good at the safe choice. She squeezed through the door opening sideways, pulling the lantern through after her. The moment she stepped fully inside, the temperature plummeted. Not gradually, instantly, dramatically, like stepping from a warm kitchen into a winter storm. Her breath came out in thick white clouds despite the fact that it was a mild October morning outside, barely cold enough for frost. The wooden floor creaked ominously under her weight, but it held firm. Eleanor moved the lantern slowly, examining every detail of the strange space. The false wall had a door cut into it, barely visible in the dim light, just a thin rectangular seam in the wood with no handle or obvious opening mechanism. She pressed her hand against it experimentally, and the panel swung inward on well-oiled hinges that moved in complete silence. Someone had maintained this secret door. Recently. Behind the false wall lay a compartment about 6 feet deep and equally wide. And sitting in the center of that hidden space was a heavy iron strongbox, secured with a lock mechanism that Eleanor had never seen before. Not a simple padlock, but something built directly into the metal itself, an intricate combination dial on the front and what appeared to be a secondary keyhole on the side, suggesting a dual lock system designed to be nearly impossible to open without the proper combination and key. Eleanor crouched beside the strongbox, setting the lantern down carefully. She ran her hand over the cold iron surface. No rust. Not a speck. The box had been sealed somehow, protected from the decay and moisture that had claimed everything else in this abandoned car. She tried turning the combination dial experimentally. It spun freely but smoothly, clearly well maintained, accomplishing nothing without the correct sequence of numbers. She was about to give up and leave, to come back with proper tools for cutting through the iron, when her lantern light caught something else, a leather satchel wedged into the narrow space behind the strongbox, partially hidden in shadow where the compartment's corner met the floor. Eleanor reached back and pulled it free. The leather was dry and cracked with age, but still intact, still functional. The brass buckles were tarnished nearly black, but they opened when she worked them. Inside the satchel, she found papers, dozens of them, some yellowed with age, others in better condition as if they'd been added to the collection over many years. The first document she pulled out made her hands tremble. It was a bill of lading dated March 22, 1912. Pittsburgh and Lake Erie Railway. Cargo manifest for boxcar 4729. Listed contents, industrial machinery parts. But someone had written in the margin, in handwriting so small and cramped that Eleanor had to hold the paper close to the lantern flame to read it, not machinery. Evidence. Patterson knows everything. Graves knows Patterson knows. God help us all if this gets out. Eleanor's mouth went dry. She shuffled through more papers with shaking fingers, her pulse pounding in her ears. A second manifest, this one listing a shipment from the Allegheny Steel Corporation headquarters in Pittsburgh to a private secure facility somewhere in Millbrook, Pennsylvania. A telegram, yellowed and fragile, with text that was brief but chilling: shipment diverted, stop route changed, last minute stop, standard channels compromised, stop trust in 01 stop. A letter on corporate letterhead, dated April 1912, signed by someone named Richard Calloway. The letter was addressed to someone called J.M. and spoke in careful, coded language about irregularities in the safety documentation and concerning patterns in the incident reports and the need for independent verification before the board meeting. And then, near the bottom of the satchel, Eleanor found a photograph that made her blood run cold. 14 men in expensive suits stood in 2 neat rows in front of a massive steel mill, smoke billowing from the stacks behind them. The photograph was professional, formal, the kind commissioned for corporate annual reports or shareholder presentations. But someone had taken a red pen or pencil and drawn careful X marks through 8 of the faces. Not angry slashes, but deliberate, almost ceremonial X marks. On the back of the photograph, in that same tiny, cramped handwriting from the manifest, someone had written, "Dead within 18 months. All ruled accidents. All lies. Evidence in the box. Remember their names." Below that, a list of 8 names with dates beside them. Robert Patterson, August 1912, fell into furnace. James Mitchell, October 1912, crushed by machinery. Henry Sullivan, December 1912, gas explosion. Charles Brennan, February 1913, suicide. William Donovan, April 1913, struck by steel beam. Thomas McCarthy, June 1913, unknown causes. George Fitzgerald, September 1913, factory fire. Daniel O'Connor, November 1913, fall from scaffold. Eleanor sat back on her heels, her heart hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears. The strongbox wasn't full of money or gold or anything valuable in the traditional sense. It was full of evidence. Evidence of something that powerful men had wanted hidden badly enough to seal it in a secret compartment inside a train car and then abandon that car on a forgotten siding for over 50 years, hoping time and rust would destroy what they couldn't safely burn. She looked at the photograph again, studying the faces that hadn't been marked with red X's. 6 men remained unmarked. One man stood in the center of the group, taller than the others by several inches, his expression hard and certain and cold. The caption printed at the bottom identified him: Vincent Graves, President and Chief Executive Officer, Allegheny Steel Corporation. Eleanor's breath caught. Vincent Graves. She knew that name. Everyone in western Pennsylvania knew that name. Vincent Graves had died in 1958, one of the wealthiest and most powerful industrialists in American history. His son, Jonathan Graves, now controlled the family's steel empire and owned enough politicians to fill the state legislature twice over. And if these papers were real, if the evidence locked in that iron strongbox proved what Eleanor suspected, then the Graves fortune, billions of dollars, generations of power and influence, had been built on murder. on the systematic elimination of men who'd discovered something the company needed to keep buried. Duchess barked from outside, 3 sharp warning barks that meant someone was approaching, someone unfamiliar. Eleanor's training from 4 years of living alone after her husband left kicked in instantly. She shoved the papers back into the satchel and moved quickly to the door, pressing herself against the interior wall where she could see out through one of the rust holes without being visible from outside. A black Chrysler sedan was pulling into the railyard, its tires crunching over gravel and dead grass. The car was new, expensive, completely out of place in this abandoned industrial wasteland. It stopped about 60 feet from the boxcar. 3 men got out, and Eleanor's stomach clenched. They weren't dressed like railroad workers or salvage dealers. 2 wore dark suits despite the early hour and the muddy railyard. The third, the driver, wore a leather jacket and moved with the controlled economy of someone trained for violence. Briggs said a woman bought it, one of the suited men called out, his voice carrying clearly in the cold morning air. Said he took 40 cents and practically ran out of the office afterward. Told me the buyer's name was Hartwell. Eleanor Hartwell. Owns the old Hartwell textile mill in town. The second suited man spat into the dirt with obvious contempt. A woman. Christ. Then Hartwell's a problem we need to solve. Mr. Graves wants this car gone. Wants it melted down and forgotten by end of business today. If Hartwell found anything inside. She only bought it yesterday afternoon, the first man interrupted. Probably hasn't even been here yet. Probably still at home planning how to cut it up. You absolutely sure about that? The man didn't answer immediately. They were walking closer now, close enough that Eleanor could see their faces clearly through the rust hole. She didn't recognize them, but she recognized the type, corporate security, maybe, or private contractors hired to handle problems that needed to disappear quietly. Check the door, the second man ordered. If it's been opened, she's been here. And if she's been here. Eleanor's mind raced frantically. If she tried to leave now, they'd see her. The door opening was visible from where they stood. If she stayed hidden and they came inside, they'd find her trapped with the evidence. And if they found her with this satchel full of papers, with the knowledge of what was in that strongbox. The decision was made for her when Duchess suddenly appeared from behind a pile of old railroad ties, moving fast and low, positioning herself between the men and the boxcar. The dog's lips pulled back from her teeth, and a deep, threatening growl rumbled from her chest. Duchess had never attacked anyone, but right now she looked ready to tear through all 3 men. What the hell is that? The driver said, taking a step backward. Dog, the first suited man said tersely. Big one. Hartwell's dog, the second man corrected, and Eleanor heard genuine concern in his voice now. Which means Hartwell's here. Right now. Either inside that car or hiding nearby. Eleanor didn't wait to hear more. She used their distraction, their moment of confusion and concern about the aggressively positioned dog. She squeezed through the door opening as quietly as she could, dropped to the ground on the far side of the boxcar away from where the men stood, and ran in a low crouch toward a line of other abandoned freight cars about 40 yards away. Her boots hit mud and dead grass, making too much noise for real stealth, but Duchess was barking now, loud and aggressive, and the men were shouting at each other. Eleanor reached the cover of another rusted car and risked a quick glance back. Duchess had retreated toward the railyard fence, still barking furiously, drawing the men's attention. But they were walking purposefully toward the boxcar now, no longer worried about the dog. Check inside, one of them ordered. If there's anything in there, anything at all, we burn the whole damn thing right now and report it as an accidental fire. Homeless people or kids playing with matches, whatever story works. Eleanor clutched the leather satchel tighter against her chest and ran. She had maybe 5 minutes before they realized she'd taken something from the hidden compartment. Maybe less if they found the satchel's hiding place disturbed. But as she sprinted through the abandoned railyard with Duchess racing to catch up, her boots splashing through frozen puddles and her lungs burning with cold air and fear, Eleanor Hartwell understood one thing with absolute, terrifying certainty. 40 cents had just bought her more trouble than she'd ever imagined possible. And somewhere in that locked iron strongbox, sealed away since 1912, lay proof of murders that one of the most powerful families in America would kill again to keep buried. Eleanor didn't go home. Home was the first place they'd look. Instead, she drove to the one person she thought might help, Margaret Chen, the town librarian and the only other woman in Millbrook who'd ever stood up to powerful men and lived to tell about it. Margaret lived above the library in a small apartment filled with books and the smell of old paper. When she opened the door at 7 in the morning and saw Eleanor's face, pale and frightened, she pulled her inside without a word. "What happened?" Margaret asked, locking the door behind them. Eleanor set the leather satchel on the kitchen table. Her hands were still shaking. "I bought an old train car yesterday. For 40 cents. I found this inside, hidden in a secret compartment." She pulled out the photograph with the red X marks and the list of dead men. "Margaret, I think the Graves family murdered 8 people in 1912 and 1913. And I think there's proof locked in a strongbox back in that rail yard." Margaret studied the photograph for a long moment, her dark eyes narrowing. She was 63 years old, had been the town librarian for 40 years, and had a memory like a steel trap. "I remember some of these names," she said quietly. "My father worked at Allegheny Steel in those years. He talked about the accidents, how many men died that year. He said it wasn't natural, the number of deaths. Said something was wrong at the company, but nobody would investigate because Graves owned the police chief and half the judges. There were 3 men at the rail yard this morning," Eleanor said. "Looking for me. They said Jonathan Graves wants the train car destroyed today. They were going to burn it." Margaret's face hardened. "Then we don't have much time. If Graves is moving this fast, he knows you found something. He'll have people watching your house, your mill, everywhere you normally go." She paused, thinking. "But he won't know about me." "Not yet." "What do we do?" Eleanor asked. "We get that strongbox open," Margaret said firmly. "And then we make copies of everything inside it and everything in that satchel. Lots of copies. We send them to newspapers, to the state attorney general, to federal investigators. We make sure the truth gets out so thoroughly that even Jonathan Graves can't bury it again." Eleanor felt a surge of hope. "But how do we get the strongbox? Those men are probably guarding the rail yard now." Margaret smiled grimly. "Then we go back tonight. After dark. With tools and enough courage to finish what those 8 dead men started 53 years ago." The day passed in agonizing slowness. Eleanor stayed hidden in Margaret's apartment while Margaret went to the library and quietly made phone calls, to a locksmith she trusted, to a lawyer in Pittsburgh who'd once helped her fight the town council, to a newspaper reporter who owed her a favor. By the time darkness fell, they had a plan. And they had help, for other people Margaret trusted absolutely, including her nephew David, who owned a welding shop and had the tools to cut through an iron strongbox if the locksmith couldn't pick the mechanism. At midnight, 6 people gathered in the abandoned rail yard. The black Chrysler was gone, but Eleanor knew that didn't mean they weren't being watched. They moved quickly and quietly, flashlights taped to shine downward to minimize visibility from a distance. The boxcar door stood open now, the men had forced it wider. Eleanor led them inside, to the hidden compartment, to the strongbox that held 53 years of buried truth. The locksmith, an older man named Frank, studied the mechanism for 10 minutes before shaking his head. "This is a Mossler double-lock system. Only a dozen of these were ever made, all for major banks and corporations. I can't pick it. You'll have to cut it open." David set up his portable torch. "This will take about 20 minutes, he said. "It's going to be loud and bright. If anyone's watching, they'll know we're here." "Then we work fast," Margaret said. The torch roared to life, blue-white flame biting into old iron. Sparks showered down, illuminating the hidden compartment in flickering bursts of light. Eleanor stood at the door with Duchess, watching the darkness outside, her heart pounding. 15 minutes passed. Then David shut off the torch and pulled away the cut section of the strongbox lid. "It's open," he said. Inside lay stacks of documents, all carefully preserved in waxed paper. Margaret and Eleanor pulled them out with trembling hands. Corporate memos. Safety inspection reports that had been falsified. Testimony from workers who'd witnessed the accidents, testimony that had been suppressed and hidden. Photographs of factory conditions that violated every safety standard of the time. And at the bottom, a leather-bound journal belonging to Robert Patterson, the first man to die. Eleanor opened the journal and read aloud by flashlight, March 18, 1912. I have documented 17 violations that directly caused the deaths of 11 workers in the past 6 months. Vincent Graves knows about all of them. He refuses to make the necessary safety improvements because they would cost money and slow production. Today he threatened my family if I take this information to the authorities. I am hiding these documents in the only place I trust, the train car that will carry them away from Pittsburgh tomorrow. If something happens to me, perhaps someone will find this someday and bring Graves to justice. Eleanor's voice broke. Patterson had known he was going to die. He'd prepared for it. He'd hidden the evidence and hoped that someday, someone would be brave enough to use it. We need to go, David said urgently. Now. I see headlights on the road. They grabbed everything, every document, every photograph, the journal. They ran from the railyard as 3 cars converged on their position, engines roaring. But they'd gotten what they came for. Margaret's lawyer friend met them at his Pittsburgh office at 2 in the morning. By dawn, copies of every document were in the hands of 5 different newspapers, the FBI, and the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office. By noon, the story had broken nationwide. Steel empire built on murder, documents prove 1912 cover-up. Jonathan Graves held a press conference, denying everything. But the evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, carefully preserved by a dead man who'd known the truth would eventually surface. 3 weeks later, federal investigators arrested Jonathan Graves and 4 of his executives. The Graves empire began to crumble as more secrets emerged, decades of corruption, bribery, and violence. Eleanor stood in the railyard one last time, looking at the rusted boxcar that had changed everything. The strongbox sat empty now, its secrets finally released into the light. Duchess pressed against her leg, and Eleanor rested her hand on the dog's head. They tried to bury you, Eleanor whispered to the ghost of Robert Patterson and the 7 other men who'd died with him. But the truth doesn't stay buried forever. It just waits for someone brave enough to dig it up. She turned and walked away from the boxcar, toward a future where justice had finally caught up with the past. 40 cents had bought more than scrap metal. It had bought the truth. And in the end, the truth had proven worth more than all the Graves billions combined. Justice doesn't always come quick, but when it comes, it's worth every sacrifice. And for Eleanor Hartwell, that fight had just begun. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another historical mystery where courage faces impossible odds. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories like this one. And if you want to support us in bringing you these tales every week, consider leaving a super thanks. Your contributions help us create better content and keep these stories coming. Every bit of support means the world to us. Thank you for watching.